It's pretty safe to say that the current state of Dead by Daylight is not very good. From a new license perk giving iframes, making the game currently pay to win, to a list of bugs so large I could make an entire video just doing a showcase. But the craziest part is that we veterans know that this is not the first time bugs like this have existed in the game, or new content was released in a broken state. Back when the first Resident Evil chapter was released, the game was actually unplayable as it constantly crashed for console players. Or how about the Twins chapter release, which had 4 out of the 6 perks be bugged, along with a killer that barely worked. These bugs are so common during new releases that at this point, we as a community started making jokes about them. We expect them. But when compared to other live service games, the state of Dead by Daylight is absolutely pathetic. So why does this game break so consistently, and when will it get fixed? Well, there is actually a clear answer as to why DBD is such a mess, and the answer is actually very problematic, as it shows why fixing this game is not a simple task at all. In fact, I would argue that Dead by Daylight is currently unfixable by design. So instead of doing the classic essay move of going back to 2016 and explaining the origin of the company and the game for the 10th time in my channel, let me cut to the chase. Dead by Daylight was simply not designed with a good foundation to last for almost a decade, and this is not a secret. The devs have said plenty of times that Dead by Daylight's success was capturing lightning in a bottle, and this is obvious if you take a look at any other project done by Behavior like Death Garden or Meteor Maker, all of which have already died. They cannot replicate the success because DBD is truly a special game. Behavior at first only did games for other companies. According to Mcote, the game director at that time, the game was just a fun project done in between their other work just to break even, not even a main project.
When you started with DBD, did you ever think it would make it this far?
Yes, of course. I was certain of it. No, that's completely ridiculous. I mean, we were, even as a studio, we were mostly a studio doing games for other people, right? Behavior has been doing that for 30 years now. This was just a fun project that we were able to do sort of in between other work, and honestly, we were hoping to break even.
The game was created by a peak of 30 people in their company, and some of the most crucial mechanics in the game, like the tutorials and even the blood web system, were added 2 months before the official release. To top it all off, we know that the devs used a coding system that is not very good for expanding an online PvP game. In an interview done to technical director Fadi Beiruti and creative director Dave Richards, the devs have stated that they use the blueprint coding system of Unreal Engine in order to accelerate the development of the game. For those of you unaware, the blueprint system is a way to visually code games that makes it pretty easy to do compared to coding them in a different programming language, and is used by many game developers for their small projects. The problem of this system is that the more complex mechanics you add to your game and the more you expand on it, your entire coding web becomes an entangled mess of wires and connections that make it very hard to keep track of everything. This is where the spaghetti coding meme comes from, because in the case of Dead by Daylight, the game is actually, unironically, coded like spaghetti, or at least it was back in the days, as the devs have said various times that they did start to rewrite parts of the game into C++. Now, it's pretty clear to see how comparing this game to another one like Marvel Rivals or any other AAA serious online game is completely pointless, because not only are the companies bigger overall compared to the 30 devs that made the original game back in 2016, all of those multiplayer games are designed with the mentality of being games played for years, and more so, even compete with games like Overwatch or Counter-Strike, and not a passion project like Dead by Daylight was. The game's inherent poor relic coding from that age shows in every single update. Rework the add-ons of Pyramid Head, and now suddenly, his punishment of the damn flicks appear on the sides instead of straight. Add Rick Grimes to the game, and now suddenly going on the right part of a stair upwards will slow you down. Something that I even see in every release is how the community asks the devs if they even playtest the game. The thing is, with how variable the game was designed to be, playtesting every single thing in the game is impossible to do before each release. At any point, due to the spaghetti coding of the game, it is entirely possible that a specific add-on from a killer breaks, like is the case with the Hag's Aura Reveal add-ons, but there are almost 1,000 of them to be tested. There is a chance that suddenly a perk will break against a specific killer power, like Vigil does for Freddy Krueger, but there are thousands of builds to test. Or a killer interactable breaks when spawned in a specific map that also needs a specific seed to spawn in a way which results in the xenomorph being stuck after exiting a tunnel, and there are literally millions of map variations to work with. This variability makes the game future-proof in terms of fun, and it was viable in the past, but nowadays it is an absolute nightmare to keep track of or to even recreate specific bugs in order to fix the game. That's not even talking about the potential perk combos that could happen. Imagine being the person that has to playtest every single perk combination in order to find out the exploit with keys and streetwise, or the Sprint Burst Blood Rush exploit. I am sure there are even more exploits still waiting to be discovered currently in the game. Each update exponentially makes playtesting worse. At this point, I don't blame the devs for having us, the community, playtest their patches. It is straight up impossible to test every single thing with how much variations the game has and keeps adding. That doesn't excuse the fact that any bugs that we find in the PTB must be fixed before release, because then there is no point in having a PTB in the first place. The worst part is that they added a kill switch feature that they are also not using for some reason. And this is just talking about the coding itself of the game and the variables it has, which make bug fixing so hard. But what about the actual systems of the game baked in it that are straight up impossible to fix? Well, let's talk about the design choices from 2016 that currently make the game worse nowadays, with no fix whatsoever possible. In the beginning, we had 4 survivors and 3 killers. So in order to pad out the game, each perk was created with 3 tiers in mind, in order to give a reason for players to grind and make their characters stronger. Each character had 3 perks, and so in total the game had 21 teachable perks and 25 general perks, all multiplied by 3, so that's 138 perks you had to unlock if you wanted to have everything grinded. Nowadays, we have 294 unique perks in the game, and 882 perks if you count tiers. Each character released meant there were 9 perk tiers added to the blood webs, cluttering them more and more. Each chapter release made the game worse and worse for new players that joined at that time, and that's on top of the fact that the prestige system removed every single thing you had unlocked for that character, so the grind was absurdly massive due to the fact that the game was never designed to last for that long. Well, that was partially fixed with the release of the Dredge chapter in the anniversary of 2022 that came with a prestige rework, making prestiges now automatically unlock the perks for the rest of characters. But this is still a problem nowadays, as each character is required to bring 3 new perks, and obviously not all perks will be good, so a lot of them are reused mechanics converted into new perks, like Rick Grimes having a perk that works in a similar way to the 2 vs 8 scout class, or Springtrap having a perk that reuses the mechanics of machine learning. All of that also coming with a completely outdated mechanic, perk tiers. Many in the community agreed that this system is completely flawed, as all it does is pad out the grind of the game, make it worse for casuals by giving them worse perks, and also heavily limit the design of the new perks due to their requirement of fitting a perk tiers model. What I mean by that is that all the perks in the game have to be designed to have a worse version of them, and by far the best example of this gimmick was Discordance, a perk that reveals the aura of a generator that has 2 survivors on it, and the perk tiers are just the distance you can see that gen, which in gameplay is completely pointless since the majority of maps are not big enough to cover the max distance. So perks cannot be designed in simple ways, as all of them have to be programmed in order to fit modifiable values. Since perk tiers are only a problem for casuals, That means they are completely pointless, and the devs know this. Just look at how absurd the perk tier differences are for Rick Grimes as an example. Apocalyptic Ingenuity's difference is just in how far you can see the locations where palettes can be built, with basically no gameplay impact between the perk tiers. They are there just for two variations to exist, and you might think that removing perk tiers would solve a lot of the issues the game has with their perk system, so why not do that? But the devs have already confirmed that perk tiers are here to stay because they are inherently baked in on the coding of the game, so removing them is a very complicated task. It shows how a very simple change in theory is a monumental coding task for them due to how they designed the game in the first place. Perk tiers just make balancing the game harder and cause potentially more bugs for no tangible gameplay reason. Don't believe me? Ask the killer players who abused Tinkerer back when it gave you infinite undetectable at tier 1. Imagine playtesting each perk with each tier and you can see how this is not humanly feasible. Another flaw of the game is their entire movement system and map design, which is something the devs have also admitted recently when the Ghoul released. The game's maps and collision were created with feet on the ground mechanics, so this means a flying killer or a killer crawling on walls would never happen because the maps and the game's code simply doesn't allow it.
And so these conversations have to happen early on, and we go, these are the rules. Like, there's no, like, your character cannot walk on the ceiling because our game will break if we do that. So is it okay if they walk on the floor, for instance?
This heavily limits the mobility of every single character in the game. Yannick, a developer, commented on this back when the Ghoul PTB was live. He said that the game is not designed with verticality in mind, and every single killer power that looks like flying, for example Vecna, Dracula or Ghoul, are actually illusions, and the only killer who actually flies is Victor, who is also one of the most unstable characters in the game. Maps rarely have verticality either, survivors cannot jump or do parkour, and the devs themselves said that if they knew the success of the game, they would have built the maps and the movement system to allow killers that crawl or jump. It's why they constantly add invisible walls in order to prevent some killers from flying like Demogorgon, or why Wesker's power works so poorly in elevations. This is also the reason why Xenomorph does not crawl or use the walls for movement, because the devs straight up said they could not do it. Creating a flying or wall crawling killer requires the devs to rework every single map in the game and completely rework the movement system the game was built on. This limitation done 8 years ago still affects the way the game is coded and the content coming to this day. How do you even fix this without reworking the game from the ground up? Another feature of the game that is also a relic from the past is the way the models are designed in the game. Have you ever wondered why the memento moris of this game suck compared to finishers like in other games? That's simply because the bodies were not designed with amputations in mind, so Leatherface sewing you will not do any damage to your body, as the models are not designed to have been split in half. In fact, all of the crazy memento moris have intelligent tricks done by the animators in order to bypass this problem. For example, the clown looks like he is cutting your finger, but all they do is bend the finger inside the hand and spawn a prop that looks like your finger. The same happens with Vecna. All they do is make your body disappear and replace it with a skeleton. To be fair, I do think this limitation allowed some licenses to be in the game, as I don't think some survivors like Nicolas Cage would be down to be split in half, or I don't think Disney would be okay with having Ellen Ripley losing her head because Demogorgon ate it. But it is the explanation as to why the gore in the game is so lacking for a horror game when compared to others. This flaw also prevents the devs from creating a dynamic wound system that is so common in games nowadays, where hits or injuries are shown in real time in your survivor body. Wouldn't it be cool to have your clothing be torn with the killer's attacks, your slashes be visible, your body filled with bruises? Well, that's not possible at all, because they would have to design every single model and cosmetic in the game to fit this new mechanic. And this modeling issue is also visible in the way the cosmetic system was created for the game. All characters, no matter who they are forced to be divided into 3 categories, which for the most part are head, torso, and pants or weapons for killers. For some killers like Nemesis or Dracula, this division is ridiculous. For other survivors that have a lot of accessories like backpacks, hats, or the anniversary crowns, 3 is not enough. Then we have the prestige system, where the prestige is not just a toggle that you can apply to all cosmetics. They are individually made, which prevents legendary characters from having it unless they remake them again. This was viable back when the game had little characters and no cosmetic store, but very bad nowadays. So if you don't like the default look of a character, you're stuck with it if you prestige. And if you like a legendary character like Geralt of Rivia, you cannot change his cosmetics either. And perhaps the biggest example of this flaw is how cosmetic powers took 8 years to make, with Houndmaster being currently the only killer with this. There is no way to customize the Fire Axe Springtrap throws, the hatchets of the Huntress, or the traps of the Trapper. And the reason why this is the case is very absurd. But basically, the killer powers are coded in the same way as items, and I am not kidding. Killers spawn with their powers as items, which is why the add-on system is the same. We know this because in the past, there was a glitch that made some killers drop the item at the start, so you had to pick up Myers' stock in order to use it, and the Chainsaw Myers glitch existed because you could swap killer powers, breaking the game even further. So Victor cannot be customized because in terms of the coding of the game, he is an item. Making powers customizable requires the devs to rework the way powers are coded completely, which at this point in time is an impossible task that could literally break the game. Another feature that many of you, especially the streamers, know sucks in this game is the anti-cheat. The game didn't even have a dedicated server system from the start, as they used a peer-to-peer system like a common indie game would. So the devs did not create the game with a strong anti-cheat incorporated on it. This makes Dead by Daylight one of the easiest games to cheat on due to its simplicity and poor means of security, allowing streamers to be targeted by these cheaters buying accounts for $1 with everything unlocked and with infinite amounts of add-ons and items. And for a game that is currently available in 2025, this is absolutely unacceptable. Adding a stable anti-cheat is basically an impossible task for the devs compared to other modern games. And if other companies like Valve struggle so much with their own games, imagine what behavior has to do with their own creation. Compare that to other games which had a strict anti-cheat placed from the start, and you can see why cheaters are such a big issue in Dead by Daylight, and why the game cannot go free to play despite having a free to play monetization scheme. And perhaps the biggest issue this game has is the fact that the devs simply cannot keep up with the content releases the game does. And this is something that we as a community already know. Each survivor that is released in the game means 3 new perks that they have to keep and balance, and plenty of cosmetics that they have to create for them, each of which has to combine with the previous ones. Each killer release could cause problems to the game that need to be fixed, but the way behavior currently works is they go for the next hit and have less and less time to fix old stuff. Soon we are getting a new chapter with a new killer and survivor, despite there being an entire bible of bugs with this patch, and with characters like Twins, Knight, and Homemaster that still sit there rotting with plenty of game-breaking bugs that the devs did not fix for years, and other killers like Trickster and Skull Merchant that are still being reworked, which in turn leads to less time to work on different killers. And since every 3 months we are getting a big update, now they also have to waste their time balancing game-breaking perks like Last Stand or Conviction, along with Clown and Ghoul being new problems. Meanwhile, syringes have been a gameplay issue for months. The content that got the biggest hit are maps, as in the past, new realms were created every 2 chapters with a map addition in the middle that was reusing assets. But nowadays, new realms are extremely rare, and the only new maps added are just reused assets like the Pizzeria, Forgotten Ruins, or the new Walking Dead map, which looks like a playtest more than an official playable map. Dracula couldn't even get the castle or a medieval map despite being such a big license, and that is simply because we know the maps are the thing that takes the longest to create, and since they keep releasing content so fast, they cannot keep up. The last new realm added to the game was Dwarka Deepwood back in 2023, almost 2 years ago, and Nostromo doesn't count because in terms of code, it belongs to Dwarka. And the solution to this is not to stop doing licensed content. Licenses have nothing to do with the state of the game, because let's remember how the game was when the Blight released, who had their POV camera glitched to be very low to the ground, and it took them months in order to fix that. Twins basically broke the game and made that patch extremely glitchy, and when the Trickster released, the game suffered from a heavy desync problem that many of us will remember fondly, and this affected every single match. No licensed content was released during that period of time. Even in terms of finances, it is significantly better for behavior to just create a new killer rather than try to fix an old one. No matter what, Ghoul brings significantly more money than fixing Houndmaster, because nobody plays her outside of her mains even if her bugs were fixed. Reworking School Merchant won't make players buy her again, because the majority of us already bought her, but for the devs, it's basically as if they are creating a new killer from scratch that's on top of the killers they have to create to release on November, on March, on September, or whatever the roadmap says. And you might think, just stop creating content then, but that is not a solution either, because we know the devs create content in advance. This Survivor and map from March are already being worked on, the November license is probably done by now, and the September chapter is full already. If the devs stop content now, we won't see the effect of this until half of 2026. Delaying the September release means nothing, because that killer is already finished, along with their cosmetics. Current license deals are planned up to 2028. So you might think, okay, then the best course of action is to remake the game, only with better coding, which is what DBD Mobile did. This would actually solve the majority of the problems the game has, because it would make its foundation better. The problem is that this is not a viable task for a company like Behavior, because it would take a monumental amount of money and effort to do, to the point it would be the same as releasing a Dead by Daylight 2 like Smite and Overwatch did. So recreating the game from scratch is simply not viable, because they would also need to recreate every single content they are still working on, meanwhile they maintain the first game until they catch up to it. So it's literally doubling their work effort currently, which we know already they simply cannot keep up. The problem of creating a new Dead by Daylight and selling it like a new game is that the devs also cannot do this. The reason why is, funnily enough, what made them stand out: licenses. Creating a new, polished version of DBD would require the devs to renegotiate every single license they ever put out in the game, with some like Cenobite being completely gone. Not only is this a massive amount of money to spend, it's a huge logistics nightmare that could cause more problems. It's the reason why some licenses took so long to be introduced in DBD Mobile, with some straight up never being added like Resident Evil. These reasons are why I think comparing DBD to other games is pointless, because no matter if the company is now AAA, the game is stuck in a unique situation. The devs have to work on a foundation made by 30 people in their garage, with archaic design choices that heavily limit a lot of the game's core systems, with various licenses that make it hard to create huge changes to the game without new negotiations, and with the only solution potentially taking years of development work along with a huge amount of money behind it, which might or might not even work in the end. And Behavior cannot risk it at all, as they are still a small company when compared to titans in the industry like Blizzard, NetEase or Activision. So, if you were put in their situation, what would you do? Waste your time coding the game from scratch and lose a lot of money, or just keep pushing new updates with crazy licenses behind them that you know your community will end up buying, and just keep milking the success of a 2016 game that already survived for almost a decade? I think the choice is obvious here, and why I am sure that no matter what, we will always be complaining about how the game breaks, how the devs constantly forget and neglect a lot of the killers and perks, and how we are stuck with new chapters bringing absurd bugs into the game forever. In short, Dead by Daylight is always doomed to be a buggy mess due to its inherent design, and the problems only get worse and worse with each update added to the game. The solutions we want as a community are economically not viable for them. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.